Recording in progress.
It's quite upsetting that we invest so much into this setup and the sound effects of it. They work, but
They don't work.
they don't get picked up by the mics and they don't get picked up by the recordings.
Oh, man.
Okay, lost him.
There's a setting on Zoom for like musicians or something like that, or record live audio or something like that. I can figure it out. Hi, guys.
Hi.
I'm serving you a blend.
Okay,
It's a ripe pour. It's a blend of Big Snow Mountain from my
Okay.
teacher and Lotus Flavor, both are from my teacher, Master Loan. Used to be upon him who passed 2019, but his teas are immortal. Or I guess it's a I miss you, seafood. So I'm very fortunate to have you three as guests, representatives of Da Ma Hua Weed Talk.
it's been around a while.
Yeah. One of the oldest medicines. So I'm particularly fascinated about how you guys link it with Chinese medicine. And my limited experience with marijuana and clinical practice is just the seed,
Yeah.
for constipation. But
Moist laxative.
yeah.
Yeah, we learned. through the
That's an important thing if you need
For
one.
granted.
So clearly it's more than that.
Yeah.
Weren't you saying there's like 8 parts to the plant?
Well, there's 3 major materia medica we're gonna resource, okay? Shenong's Fan Cao Jing,
Yeah.
okay? Tao Hong Jing's work, 3 volumes of it, okay? And then Li Shizhen. Li Shizhen has 8 parts, Tao Hong Jing has 4 parts, Shenong has 2. Okay, so over time, and realize Shenong is, we're gonna go 0 BCE, okay? And then Tao Hong Jing, what is it, 450, 500, 500 CE?
Okay.
And then Li Shizhen is more like 1550.
Okay.
Right.
Wow, so
We have a
this makes sense.
span of time, okay?
So Shen Nolan was kicking with Jesus?
Shenong, one thing we must realize, okay? There is no extant Shenong, okay? It's an oral tradition that starts getting written down, and there's all sorts of scraps. Again, the printing press is invented in China, and the Chinese will certainly tell you this, okay? 700. So the 2 sources I mentioned first, Shenong and Tao Hong Jing, okay, were all scribed from one teacher to one student to one student to one teacher that way, okay? So you have all sorts of scribinal error, plus,
Scribinal.
yeah, the scribe made a mistake, man, okay? And or the bamboo shirts, they burned, the scrolls were lost. But people had copied people's copies, teacher to student, teacher to student. And so they could correlate going backwards. This is what we think was in the Shenong, but this is my Shenong, so my Shenong is the best.
Of course.
Okay.
Mine's
It's all-
2% off.
Yeah, you put off now, but here's the coupon code if you need it, okay? But really, that's the truth of it is that we have, it's 2,000 years later now. We have a point in time at 0. We're gonna call it our baseline Shenong. We've got 500, we've got Tao Hong Jing, right? And then we got 1,500, right? Then we're at like 20, 2020, 2024.
And then we have Joseph Carter.
We have come up wide. Yeah, we are just getting started.
Got it. So thank you. Then Lisa Robinson, what's your part in this?
Yeah,
Yeah, I may be an instigator here.
yeah, I think so.
At least on this journey that we're sharing collectively, so.
So what's your story, Robinson? Granted, I know.
Yeah,
Share us a story.
so it's, my story, I guess, with cannabis and Chinese medicine is long. So 30 years of co-cultivating with the plant, 30 years. So, about a decade of working with and around Chinese medicine, with an openness to cannabis, and spent a little time at ACTCM, didn't finish in acupuncture, but been doing the twin on Qigong, Tai Chi, since then, working in the cannabis industry. So, yeah, it's a.
Let me ask.
Go ahead, please, yeah, help me out.
There was someone in your past who asked you a question about
Right.
cannabis.
This is always the best way to start how we got together.
Okay.
So at ACTCM, I had a history of medicine class with Ken Rose. And he asked the question, what had happened to cannabis and Chinese medicine? He'd been asking that question at least 6 semesters in a row. I went to school to kind of try and find an answer to that question, at least for myself, and see how the medicine and my own journey with cannabis could kind of continue to co-create and co-cultivate each other. I got really lucky. ACTCM had a really nice library, and I found an online version of Li Shizhen's South Gonglu because of its kind of eminent status as the apex materia medica of the Ming. It was carried through all the way up until the DCM-ification of classical Chinese medicine. Did a keyword search through about 20 chapters until I found something really interesting, which was a large hit rate for the Ma character. So I went back into school the next day, went to the library, and there it was. Found it. Li Shizhen. About 3,300 characters, 8 different parts of the plant.
In Chinese characters, not in translation.
No, there was only one translation at that time. It was Foreign Language Press.
Yeah.
But that kind of kicked it off. And then a decade almost later, 8 years later, Ken got the 3 of us together. Ken's still here in spirit, and I stay in touch with him. But
Okay.
yeah, this is it. Well, what we've been doing for a while, from a lot of angles. Clinically, in the garden,
Yeah.
everything. So wherever you want to go with it.
For sure. Well, you brought it up again. It's the second time we mentioned here that there's 8 parts of the plant. And so you didn't do it, but I want to pop quiz me.
Okay.
What are these 8 parts of the plant? Okay, so
It's going to get interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, yeah.
So we have root,
Yes.
maybe different parts of the root.
Mhm.
The root's in one category.
Okay, and then you have stem or
Stalk.
stalk,
Yep.
right?
You peel it, there's a lot of things.
Then you have kind of the heart of the stalk, maybe.
Not outlined as a medicinal form, but you could peel it and use the bast for different things. I mean, there's fiber, there's.
For sure.
applications.
So we have 2.
Yep.
Clearly the flower,
Flour, marble.
clearly the seed.
The leaf.
The leaf, so we're at 5. I could also think maybe the keef, the crystals.
You could, that would be good. And you know, that might be close to a loose translation of Maharun. So there's the flour, there's the seed, there's the oil from the seed. That one. And there's also a
Wash
potential
water.
component that's highly debatable, and that could be considered like the pericarp or the shell coat, or even the hem part, because the seed itself is more of a nut. And so the heart inside of it is a distinct part as well. Start to splice it up a little bit there. It's a very interesting exercise in botany and the Chinese. What else did we leave out though? We had the oil and we had the.
There's a wash
Yeah.
water,
Yeah,
washing the
wash water.
stalks.
Yeah.
Probably get some level of CBD out of it.
Oh, so kind of like how you use the wash water of rice for beautification and clean hair.
Lots of applications for hair growth.
We
Yes,
Topical,
Yeah,
not.
topical.
It ain't just for smoking
that
anymore.
water, shampoo with
And
it.
here's the,
Wow.
and here's the fun part, most of the times if you find a classical indication, you can correlate some modern science and the cannabinoids
Right.
that actually fits really nicely. It's a really fun.
That's essentially what we're doing with the forgotten roots of cannabis in Chinese medicine. Okay, he's using modern science and the cannabinoids to see if they correlate with these ancient indications from the Shenong, Tao Hong Jing,
Okay.
and Shizhen.
Yeah, that kind of segues nicely into where I fit into all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I came into this as a cancer patient as we were just starting to have medical legalization in California. And I had a nice conversation with a medical cannabis doctor in hopes that I could avoid doing standard treatment. And he rolled his eyes at me, handed me a card, and then I said, well, that's great. I have a card. What do I do with this? And he said, well, you'll have to talk to a bud tender about how to use it. I can't tell you that. And I walked out of there in disbelief, right? All right, I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. This is a plant that's in my materia medica that I learned as a moist laxative, but I know has so much more to it. I'm being told by a medical doctor to go talk to a bud tender about how to use this plant in a way that's not going to poison me as I'm going through chemo. Are you kidding me? With a few expletives on the end of that. And so I started digging into the medical literature and figuring out what I could figure out for how to support myself. And it ended up being a really, really deep rabbit hole. And fast forward about 3 or 4 years, and I'm on a Scholars of Chinese Medicine Facebook forum, and somebody, I think it might have even been Ken, throws up, hey, I'm looking for somebody to review this monograph on cannabis and Chinese medicine. Is anybody up for the task? And
Ooh.
pick me, pick me, pick me. And next thing I know, I've got this 300-page document sitting in my inbox, which was what brought us in here put together.
Oh, wow, who's gonna get it?
He's got it.
So I
He's our
start
reference
reading this.
librarian, okay?
And I read all 300 pages with circles and arrows and comments in the corner and send it back. And the next thing I know, we've got 3 of us working on this project. So I come in, like I was not a classicist. I was always an integrated medicine person in Chinese medicine. And my practice is very much now integrative oncology. And along the way, I've gotten certified as a medical cannabis coach. And I'm constantly in the medical literature about this plant and all of the things that it does. And so as they're doing the classical piece and the translations, and I'm suddenly finding myself drawn into classics in a way that I've never been. I'm coming back and going, oh, that fits really nicely with this last study that I just read about CBD and, or THC and, or the entourage effect, and how this works, et cetera, et cetera. So 3 of us come with a whole lot of passion from very different directions to create our own entourage.
So then where would the hub be considered? Because you're local, you're San Diego, you're up north.
Oh, it's gotta be the cloud.
We have been meeting on Zoom just about weekly for what, 2.5 years?
Yeah, going on great.
Yeah, that's all right. What's really cool is that my college roommate, Rob Money,
Yeah.
is involved with Rare Cannabinoids Company because his neighbor is the founder. And so I was his first line of business to get a clinic sponsored with Rare Cannabinoids. And then Rob hits me up and goes, so do you know Joseph Carter? Yes, I do. And then so how did you guys get connected with Rare Cannabinoids?
I don't know.
It was me.
It was you. It was like, I was there.
I've been in the industry off and on my whole life, but so I wasn't really stalking Rare, but I noticed them when Hawaiian.
Nice preface, by the way.
When Hawaiian Choice, well, no, I mean, they're still unique. I mean, there's a couple companies that kind of caught on to them, but their offerings are unique. And I was looking for a clinical source. I've been doing consultations in the clinic since my time in ACTCM. And we'd had different products on the shelf, and Rare made a press release, and 6 months later, they actually became a company. And I was early on in that. I kind of chased Rob down and said, please sell me a lot of product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just really respect Rob and their company and their approach, and it's a great partnership.
So then I probably heard about Rob from you.
Yeah, early on, like one of our first meetings, I would have been,
Yeah.
like, if you guys aren't good to this.
Well, and I looked at their website and tried to digest all of it. You know, they got a cannabinoid and they got all the studies. It was just too much. So I took an artist palette and I put the cannabinoids on it. Okay, and I could put THCV and CBD and CBG and CBN and kind of make sense that way visually. And then I'm getting ready to talk to this guy Rob, who's gonna open an account with me. So I email it to him, right? And he gets on Dr. Carter, how talk about what I was doing. She goes, oh, I've got to show you this new graphic we just came. And he sent me my image back.
That's a cannabis business, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
But it was like, okay, we're talking the same language. Yeah,
okay. Well, we haven't touched on it yet, but I'm really curious about this part too, because I know you as a scent guy. Tell me about the terpenes.
oh, don't get me started.
Right, because
So-
my thought, because
Sure.
not to cut off your answer, it's because when we talk to a bud tender, aside from THC count or CBD count, we go for terpene.
in studies about people and the strains they like
Uh-huh.
are based more on their terpenes than the amount of THC or the amount of CBD or the ratio between the two.
Yeah.
Flavor, flavor, and flavor.
Yes.
And what got me on that is flavor is one of the things I learned for every Chinese herb,
Mm.
okay?
And flavor is
Wait.
my nickname in Chinese.
Yeah, wei, yeah. And it's, you know what it is? It's the smell and taste of a wet pine tree. That's what the character actually shows you. Okay, so, and the turpentine, that's where terpenes come into the language. They come in from the conifers.
Mm.
Nature made them a long time ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, and when they work, nature doesn't get rid of them. Okay,
Mhm.
so certain plants have certain beneficial for them concentrations of terpenes and other chemistry.
That's a key too.
There's a
That's-
spectrum of chemistry. We decided to hack it into pieces.
Got it.
But the flavorful ones we'll tend to call terpenes,
Mhm.
okay?
And terpenes are in all things, right? It's not just.
You don't get much terpenes out of a blue-green grass, okay? Out of someone's lawn or golf course. There's not a whole lot of terpenes there.
Mm.
Because in the evolution of golf course grass, they didn't need terpenes to attract pollinators, okay? They didn't need terpenes to defend. A plant makes chemistry for it, not for fucking us, okay? And
Curse more, guys, by the way.
Curse can do
Yeah, curse more, please.
oh shit, really? Thank you, I'm Yeah, but that really, this is one I play with. It's like, there's a co-evolution. I mean, this guy is a co-evolution with cannabis, okay? And Terry's stuff is a co-evolution. The plants created a biologic system that we evolved in. And then we harvest and play with them and we cultivate them, awaken and cultivate over time, and we change their chemistry while they're changing our chemistry. Okay? We're gonna find out from her especially, there's this thing we now call the endocannabinoid system. When I was in college, there was no endocannabinoid system, even if it's 100 million years old. There wasn't one. Okay, we had opioids were new. Okay, looks like there's these things called cannabinoids. Maybe there's something called ginsengenoids. Okay, who knows?
I like
Okay.
the one of that.
But we had such a long co-evolution, okay, that which came first, the chicken or the egg? Plants came first,
Mhm.
but it's co-evolved. So it's not an either or, it's a how and. Yeah.
And it gets a little bit confusing when you start looking at some of the modern literature because the chemicals in the plant were discovered first. So we had mappings of the molecular structure of THC and CBD and I believe CBN. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh wait, we have receptor sites that look an awful lot like those molecules that fit them. So let's name them after those molecules. So we've got this system that got
Endo.
named the endogenous cannabinoid system after the plant molecule.
Oh, not Indo.
Yeah, endo.
Oh, this whole time it's being Indo.
Yes,
Endo.
That would be natural.
Oh.
Yeah,
Endocannabinoid.
endo.
The endo to end all cannabinoids.
So then you're like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean we've got these receptors for this plant? Well, we have receptors for opioids, we have receptors for capsaicin. We know that there are some receptors for some of the molecules in Huang Qi. And I'm sure there are a whole lot more that we just found, figured out yet.
That's helpful because if you were to flip the chicken and egg, at least for the naming of the endocannabinoid system, that's to distinguish it from phytocannabinoids. You might call it the homeostasis system, which would maybe bring through the clouds a little bit clearer to people than endocannabinoids.
Yes.
You have to unpack that quite a bit and start speaking in chemistry, but
Wow.
homeostasis usually kind of, that's something we can
Yeah.
talk about, the role of
So,
ACS.
If I may, then endocannabinoid is no different than the endocrit. With that same kind of prefix.
ENDO. And Endo was his name.
Learning.
Kind of a
Yeah.
system behind systems that helps
Learning.
through postsynaptic regulation.
Yeah.
To kind of turn things off so that we don't do too much with this.
It's a regulatory set of molecules, okay? And we are creatures in need of regulation.
It's very much involved in pretty much all things, including pain, which as practitioners and people that.
Yeah.
Even the electric, endocannabinoid system also being critical to acupuncture's analgesic,
Well, that's one of those
So we
things.
start to work at it from lots of angles.
So
Yeah.
what'll blow your mind is that we have more receptors in our brain for cannabinoids than we have for any of the neurotransmitters. More than
Serotonin.
serotonin, more than
Whoa, so
dopamine.
we're supposed to be stoned. We can generate our own?
I'm not gonna be a
Yeah.
canon, okay?
Yes, we can.
We do generate.
We
our
do.
own.
That, yeah.
Yes.
What you won't live if you don't. You can't live if you don't have pain, and you can't regulate pain if you don't have an endocannabinoid
And
system.
you'll like this, one of the main endocannabinoids is ananda. Ananda.
Bliss.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a protein in the brain.
Chocolate.
Yes.
You have some.
I've learned something
You
with
have
these
some
guys.
dark secrets, don't you?
Hey, how about this tangent? How you like tea?
Good.
It's my other favorite plant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
I didn't know.
Mm.
You're
Well-
gonna leave with some tea today.
I would be thrilled to leave with some.
That's that duck shit.
I'll take some duck shit.
And then you talk about
This cooler is
Talk shit and
exquisite.
Where is your mind, man?
This is a blend, again, this is Big Snow Mountain and Lotus, it's a really special pairing. And I only started trying this blend maybe about a month or so ago. I really like it. It's kind of because, you got one choice bud and there's only so much of it, it's really expensive. I'm gonna water it down with this swag.
Speaking of which, okay, so if you're taking the flower of cannabis, okay, the usual classic Northern California method of ingestion is inhaling the vapor that's been burnt,
Hmm.
okay? What if you made an infusion of it at the same sort of heat level as you make for your tea? Okay, you're gonna get a subtle profile, okay? That's probably gonna highlight the things that more mentally we like about cannabis. People usually go sativa. I think better with that, okay? So there may be a pairing, in fact, we've got a tea ceremony she invented,
Okay.
where you combine sinensis, Camellia sinensis, okay, with cannabis whatever's, okay? And you see what happens.
Well, I get the temperature thing for the decarboxylation.
Mhm.
What I don't get is the fat. Because what I understand cannabinoids to be a fat soluble.
Well, let's back up on that because boiling water temperature is below the threshold for decarboxylation.
Oh, yes, it's 250, right?
So if you haven't
So not the
already
British style.
decarboxylated your cannabis and then make tea out of it, the majority of what you're extracting are the acid forms of cannabinoids. And that has a completely different medicinal profile than the activated or decarboxylated. And that,
You can burn with your tea though.
you.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you typically carboxylate first and then make tea out of it if you're looking for the intoxication effect. But the acid forms, the cannabinoids are substantially more anti-inflammatory, antiemetic, and antioxidant. And so when you're looking at that patient going through chemo who is struggling with nausea, and you take a CBDA tincture, which tastes singularly horrible. And you have the option of taking fresh flour and steeping it in boiling water and getting a higher concentration extraction because the acid forms are more water soluble than your decarboxylated forms. And you also can't get too much THC because of what you're talking about with solubility. You can extract just so much THC before you are saturated on your solution. And then you can keep doing repeat infusions with it
Coconut oil.
or a little coconut oil.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So you said you can't get too much THC is what I hear from you. But you can certainly try it.
Well, you can try. And you can try. You can try.
I'm talking about that, that's why.
And we can all get over medicated, and it's a thing.
And you can certainly.
Plastics, actually.
Really?
It is, yeah. But before we go to plastics, I just want to say THCA and CBDA don't get enough love, and that's because we do love the decarboxylated form. But recent studies, COVID,
Yes.
morbidity, recovery time, the acidic forms of cannabinoids have been showing amazing things, so. Yeah,
For sure.
kind of in all forms, like even juicing the leaves or microgreens
So-
or the hemps or the hemp parts, we can talk about
The
those.
plant made the chemistry for the plant survival. It doesn't smoke itself. Okay?
No, it does not, but this is where I'll enter the conversation now. The plant may not smoke itself, but as a cultivator, a co-cultivator with the plant, one of the most sublime experiences to share with the plant is to be in the sunshine, in the garden.
Oh, yeah.
Late in the season, when the plant is in its full regalia and you've spent the season and you're out there with last season. And last season gets burnt in a sacrificial way, combines with your central nervous system, and the plant from last year and the plant from this year in your own consciousness kind of all come together. You all kind of realize what we're doing in the garden with the seasons. So the plant doesn't smoke itself, but there is a component of the plant's chemistry and our chemistry that do come together in consciousness.
Yeah.
And there's a contribution from both sides.
It's a whole annual ceremonial cycle in that form, okay? That you and the plant are basically equally sacred in and basically attending to.
And there's harvest. The time of consequence.
Well, this is near and dear to me because many people know me as a Wudang guy, but very few people know that I funded my Wudang journeys by working in Northern California in the trim scene. And I was able to make enough money in 1 month of trimming that would fund an entire year. And then when it came time for visa obligation to leave again, I just align it with the fall.
Wow.
And that's why I did 5 years in China.
Oh, thank man.
Wow.
Yeah, the planet,
Not good.
our shared existence.
So
over
you used at least 3 different parts.
1,000 years.
Okay, the moist laxative, of course.
Mount Sean.
There's
How Jay was trying to get a line.
Well, that's the lack of information in acupuncture school on anything other than Homoren, which means a seed that's been fired so it can't germinate. Okay, because you wouldn't want people growing that shit. You know what I mean? That could lead to something, okay? And that gets the oils at a good place, so it is a moist laxative. Okay, is what we found in kind of our thesis is that if you look at the 3 materia medica, it's always Shangpin. It's always high level, upper level, superior level, the usual translation. We find that it's superior nutrition, it's superior pain relief, and it's superior spirit relief. I want to just throw that out. And so you actually have in Shannon indications for these. Okay, you also have in your clinic today indication, everybody who's an acupuncturist or herbalist practitioner out there, you already have people coming into your clinic using it for all of those things, whether you know shit about it or not.
And whether you know that they're using it or not.
And whether you know that it's actually in your medicine from the old books that we're supposed to be based on, and somehow it gets forgotten. Now, I know I've smoked so much sometimes that I've forgotten things, but to forget 2,000 years of history, that's a really hard act. You know, so I'm not gonna, maybe there is a smoking gun to that, okay? But again, it's good medicine. It's CBD. You know what the biggest market for CBD products are? People 65 and above. Pain, arthritis,
As well.
okay? Then the whole anti-nausea stuff, cancer, other chemotherapies, okay?
Parkinson's and MS.
Yeah.
The neuroprotective and the anti-seizure and the anti.
Kids that are epileptic, okay? They're taking in enough chemistry to get their parents couch locked for weeks.
That's true, they dose hard.
Yeah, and they're functional because their nervous system, endocannabinoid system in there needs that because it's out of balance and the molecules help it get back into balance. Okay,
The dosing that is being done with autistic kids, kids with severe retractable epilepsy is mind blowing. There are stories of parents who are like, I'm gonna take one dose of what I give my kid and see what happens. Parent ends up in the ER.
Yeah.
And the kid is functioning neurotypical and going to
For
school.
like 2, 3, 4, 500 mLs. Dang,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, it's,
tasty.
yeah, 250 milligrams.
you don't walk,
You don't start with
you know what I
that.
mean? You just go, oh.
You know, they start the same way that the rest of us are told to start. They'll start when it goes slow, but they'll titrate up until they start to see the effect that we're looking for. And then if you're starting to be over medicated, then they titrate back down in that sweet spot where they're getting the benefit without being too sedated or overly intoxicated or whatever other side effects.
Yeah. Get that. So cool.
I could offer this where it ties back into the rectification of names from the classics. If we're talking about good information from modern science.
Yeah.
Well, to do that, we have to really, nature doesn't care what we call it. I think we can all agree about that. So when we talk about medical use or adult use, yeah, these are distinctions and the psychosomatic component needs to be aware of it. But the plant, it doesn't really care. The plant's got a mission, and that's a phytocannabinoid interacting with their different places. So even, and the gateway drug theory, right? Let's just debunk that as well. Like we're talking about harm reduction. We're just talking about large doses for kids with autism and epilepsy. How about opioid use disorder? 900 milligrams of CBD a day. We prescribe at UCLA right now to help these folks out. Also, we have the neuroprotective studies that Lisa mentioned. We have both methamphetamine and alcohol studies where after a night of binge drinking or meth use, there's a joint consumed or cannabis is consumed at the end of the night. People can associate what they want with that, but the reality is at the end of the day, less harm, neuroprotection, antioxidization. I'm not saying if you're gonna smoke meth or eat alcohol to smoke weed but the perception is that that's part of the drug culture, the drug use. When what we're talking about is an ancient medicine and the over medicated versus long-term use, starting low and going slow, but attaining that optimum dosage. That's in the oldest of the Chinese material methods, right? And the correlation between that and our nutrition, our health, our pain, and our spirit.
And I'll share another fun fact that as we were talking about who we are, in the 1980s at the peak of the Just Say No NO era, I was working as a substance abuse counselor. So not in the DARE program, but I was in upstate New York at the time, and I was working with all of the duly diagnosed bipolar and schizophrenic people who were also out on the streets. At that point, crack cocaine was the big thing. Cannabis was seen as the gateway drug. People would start with cannabis and get comfortable doing the things that were illegal, and it would open the door to other things. And it's not what I saw clinically. And I think that's been well debunked, that was the mantra at that point in time, is And that was certainly what we were trained to look for at that point in time. But I did, worked as a clinical counselor and then as a vocational counselor for about 6 years, 7 years, back in the 80s before I went to acupuncture school. And had certainly done my share of college age child of the 80s play with this plant before that. And then took a big pause with my interactions with the plant until I got into going through cancer treatments in 2017. So I really come full circle from experimenting to prohibition to really medically advocating for it and just finding there's so much in this plant.
8 parts.
8 parts,
Well, I think.
over
too-
500 active ingredients.
Right, and we talked about the terpenes, those are some part of the volatile sulfuric compounds. We're noticing that the actual differentiation and diversity of cannabis smells it's too much for just the terpenes that we see. They're not diverse enough, it's something else in the plant, so.
There's an entourage effect, too, like a symphony.
And it really comes from the morphology of the plant, the dioecious nature of the plant. We haven't really talked about this, so it's a good place to go. It's the true male and true female. Only about 5% of the plant kingdom works that way. And so cannabis being as old as it is, as close to human civilization as it's been, it's really interesting. And it's kind of like people, right? Between brothers and sisters or countries or cultures, you can see a wide genetic variation, even with seeds. We spend a lot of time talking about the seeds. One male and one female, you can come up with hundreds, thousands of phenotypes from that. Different chemovars, different cultivars that have different chemical makeups. And so it's, the plant is beguiling. We can't over medicate.
Yeah. And we love its beguiling nature, which is why we've cultivated it in so many cultures for so long and for different ends.
The rope and the seed, yeah, we like to be full in our belly. We like to be able to like conquer the seas and like have clothing. Yeah, it's
Well-
very helpful.
So superior nutrition.
Mhm.
Lisa, give me 3.
Okay. Amino acids. The seed contains all of the essential amino acids.
Not 1, not 2, but all.
All of
Dude, I'm gonna
them.
buy some more Mexican swag right now.
Right?
I hate to see it, that's easy to think to me.
Essential fatty acids.
Uh-huh.
We need a particular ratio of omega-3 to omega-6.
Yeah.
Most of us that consume an American diet are
Deadly.
massively overloaded on omega-6.
Hmm.
Cannabis seed has the ratio of roughly 2 or 3 omega-6 to 1 omega-3, depending on which phenotype you're looking at, which is what is considered to be the ideal ratio for human nutrition.
So you get your omegas without fish.
You get your omegas
So
without
beans.
fish.
The
Yes.
superfood is superfoods.
It is also one of the only plant sources for vitamin D,
Whoa.
and very high in calcium, high in magnesium, just about the perfect ratio of fats to carbohydrates to protein.
No, proteins. How about protein?
Well, that's amino acids are the base building blocks.
So you can get buff on wheat.
So you can
Oh,
get
yeah.
buff on.
Water or something. I mean, you really like your workout, if you take your protein pills prior to, you'll do well. And it's another reason why in the classics, whether it's Shenong or Taohongjing, or the Qi Yao Shi, like the big agricultural tome that was from the same time, like 1,000 characters, really distinguishing between cannabis itself and seed production. And that's where the knowledge of the male and the female and how to work with that is very unique. So, yeah, definitely, we didn't talk about the runner stuff.
We didn't yet.
And I wanted to unpack that, just because I enjoyed this group, and I kind of wanted to go back to that plant thing. We're talking about rectification names of adult use versus medical use. In the clinic for so long, and it's just a conversation that always seems to come up, so I'm curious about my friend's take here. People come in the clinic and they want the medicinal effect of the plant, but yet they're really sometimes concerned about the high. And I think unpacking that term high and how that fits into our medicine, into the
Right.
classics and the science, and then how to help people kind of approach that, because a lot of times I'll give folks stuff and then they'll bring it back and be like, I didn't feel anything. It's like, well, we didn't really want to feel anything. We wanted to just have the anti-inflammatory. There is that desire to be high, to some of them.
Change of consciousness somehow.
Yeah, and have a spirit, the spiritual experience with the plant. You know, we've got the nutrition, the pains, talk about that too. You know, so
And again,
clinically, it comes up time and time again.
1,500 to 2,000 years of history of superior nutrition, superior pain relief, superior spirit regulation. Okay, we can call it creation or recreation, recreational use. The jazz musician who's using it to play music, is that wrong? Is that medicinal? I like the approach, and Ken was a champion of this, is like, all use is medicinal. What are they trying to treat? Okay, and if you know that, you can help them shape it. You know, and shape it to more individualistically for what they need and do harm reduction.
Absolutely.
You know, hey, that's what we're supposed to do in clinic. That's good medicine.
And now we have something new within the last few years, recent history, right? Precision dosing on an edible. So we can debate incense and the role of, you know,
Mhm.
sacred smokes, and that's fine. But we have testing, we have cannabinoid profiles, we have terpene profiles, we have
Yeah.
dosages that we can titrate, so we can kind of help navigate these situations where in the classics, it'll say, you know, if you take too much, you'll run around and, you know.
See ghosts.
Yeah, you'll be like.
Or ancestors that they
Hyperactive
maybe.
senses of grandeur, you know, I mean, we've all seen that, experience that, it translates really pretty clearly, and then the next line says, you know, okay, you had too much acute one time, but if you take it over a long period of time,
Get your
you'll
system.
attain Shunming and a light natural body.
Spirit brightness.
Shunming's not a small term in classical Chinese history, medicine, Taoism.
Shunming.
That's a big, yeah, right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Spirit, sun, and moon.
Yeah.
Oh,
All the light
that's
there
enlightening.
is, yeah, spiritual.
Yeah. Oh, and again,
As a medical too.
yeah,
Outside of spiritual context,
Yeah.
well,
you
and
can medically achieve enlightenment.
Well, Tao Hong Jing is our best source for that line, even though it is historically associated with the Shenong. And Tao Hong Jing's role in Mao Shan Shangqing Taoism is also very interesting, and the overlap of those two traditions with his work in medicine. So it stays along in the traditions,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have, each tradition has
Well-
certain things to say about that area.
Tao Hong Jing could be known as the Leonardo of China. Okay,
Okay.
polymath, a general, a pharmacist, da 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 da. Okay, first to really write a natural history of the plants. Okay, and one of his big ones is going to be Dama. Okay, I don't even know
Well,
what
it
it's.
wasn't Dhamma at the
He
time, it
calls
was
it-
Mafun, which
That's why we have him around.
I enjoy it as cannabis proliferous.
Right.
Mafun?
Mafun, a lot of times people get twisted up, right? They think it's the seed, they think it's the pericarp, they think it's the flower. There were 6 or 7 other kinds of Mafun, not Ma, but Mas in those Materia Medicas. So to differentiate it at the specific botanical part wouldn't make much sense. You would need to separate it from sesame or, you know, one of the other Mas. And proliferous is pretty self-evident, right? It's a money plant. There's like, you know, there's a lot of action in that character. And then from there, Tao breaks it down into different distinct parts. And then by the time you get to Li Shizhen, he doesn't even list the seed as Mazo anymore. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and pivotal to the forgotten piece. Okay, Tao Hong Jing, and he's playing with the translation. I'm helping out a little bit. Okay, but it hasn't been translated into English, right? And this is the piece where its use across a spectrum can actually be given to a historical person, okay? Not just a set of legends, okay? And something that is written down, but written down before printing presses, okay? And so you get a collection of traditional indications and uses. And Tao Jing gets bad press and good press because of Shangqing Taoism. Okay, these are people that are spacing out about all the different cosmos and different places you can go within your body. Okay, and some of us, that's like the heart of the Qigong. That's the heart of why we do this, is to get into that inner exploration. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, because he's the one who actually makes a system that sees different categories of plants. Not just upper, middle, and lower, but these are the cereals, these are the vegetables, these are the minerals. He actually creates a broad categorization that I recognize as a modern Chinese herbalist has something inherent in the system. It wasn't. There was a listing of herbs he gave it that system. Okay, and in that system, any plant that you can use, again, the plants aren't there for our uses, but we find out how to use them. Okay, and the versatility of Dama, I'm gonna call it that, okay?
Sure.
You can have a variety that's gonna be good for the root. You can have a variety that's gonna be good for the seed. You can have a variety that's gonna be good for the flower and the full spectrum of flowers. Okay, so the versatility, back to the dioecious nature you were talking about.
This is
And-
Li Shizhen too, I mean, this is
Yeah.
exactly what he goes through in terms of.
I mean, you know, the term in Buddhism and Taoism, awaken and cultivate, well, what are they cultivating? Okay, themselves, their spirit, their essence, okay, Qing Qi Shen. And that this was considered a superior medicinal for that process.
The data point I missed about Shenming, good time to tie back to it, we were kind of like, wow, that's interesting. Only 2% of the entries in Tao Hong James Materia Medica contain the term Shen. He uses the term Shen Xian, which is the immortal, right, in the seed, and only about 4% of the entries have that. So, yeah. And we have lists of those entries, those are things like the different stem bars and the mushrooms and the alchemical elixir materials, really at that point, so.
Yeah, super food out of that stuff.
Well, some of those superfoods like mercury, you get really, really high before you die. You know the Mad Hatter,
Uh-huh.
okay?
Yeah.
Hatters take felt and they're dipping in an aqueous solution of mercury, which stiffens it to make the hat. But they're making, I made a hat. They're getting high. I'm immortal until you die.
Not all highs are the same.
Yeah.
And as long as we're on Li Shizhen and superior nutrition, we'll circle back to that because the seed is one of the primary things that was talked about in Li Shizhen's work. And he's using kanji as a prescription for things like weakness after childbirth. And for people who are recovering from surgical procedures or traumas, to give them a cereal, basically, of the hemp seed.
It's not just for moist laxatives and.
Yeah.
I wonder if you do like a porridge, like a drip or
It's a
something.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's the formula.
Exactly, that
So-
is the recipe.
So Li Shizhen, I think it's 38 indications and prescriptions, of which he contributes 18 to 20. The second site, most cited source is Sensei Miao, and then it's just a who's who of Chinese medicine, all the way through the history.
Well, a story I like to share is when I was in the temple, one of my older brothers, Dalian Jesse, he took me under his wing and took me on a sacred site tour. So I was on all the Taoist mountains with him.
Right.
And we spent a lot of time on Huashan,
Mhm.
and it was growing wild all along the hillside.
Mhm.
And there was this one monk
Mhm.
who would harvest it, dry it, and roll the most swaggy, wild flowers. Me in California, boy, don't touch that. But it was the most thin, wiry, stringy flower. But he harvested it, grind it up, and roll it in newspaper to smoke. And then so I got into the conversation. I was like, so how does pot tie into Taoist cultivation? And, you know, especially in the conversation of its enlightening. He had a really interesting take. He said it's a catapult, but it's a crutch at best.
Yeah.
And so it'll open a gateway, but if you're dependent on that for the gateway, then it's false attainment.
If it is in an endo system, you have to open it somehow, then you use how to cultivate, you learn how to cultivate your own endo. Okay.
But I really my sound effect for you.
And you know, how else do we stimulate our endocannabinoid system and boost endocannabinoid? Well, nursing and
What acupuncture, you know what acupuncture lights up when you do back acupuncture? The endocannabinoid system goes off the ropes.
Oh. What, the sponsor boards?
Yeah, you know how sometimes you get on the tail, you go, whoa,
I see that all the time.
yeah. Watto, okay,
Well, nobody gets high before they come in for an act.
Oh, no,
No, never.
Nobody comes in. People are never really trying to think it, right? Like, that's a really good treatment.
Practices in Berkeley, you mean nobody comes in hot?
We can look at it one of two ways, either that you're there to treat their disorder with Chinese medicine, or you're gonna recognize they've been treating themselves with Chinese medicine and now they just want like the full.
A little trim around the edges.
I do have my patients where I actually have to air out the room so the next person doesn't get the contact high from what was on the clothing of the person that came in.
It was Eli Lilly's grandson who did his PhD work on cannabis, and they were trying to develop a cannabis americana. And they found that the cannabis chinensis was what they were working with the most. So in China right now, there was a paper that came out last year. They have a germplasm bank with something like 1,500 different varieties. So that's your growth, that's your medicine, that's your fiber. But within the medicine, we have really no idea. Like what? I mean,
The phenotype.
it either came from the south side of the mountains or the north side of the mountains, and their speculation was both. So like China is the land of hemp and mulberry. And, you know,
And the plants evolved to survive there. And then we went, oh, I like that one, not as much as that one.
well, Silk Road, a lot of a lot of the ancient cultures, whether it's the plant was pretty well dispersed.
So we have history with this plant in India and Nepal and Tibet and all over the Middle East, Persia, Ottoman Empire, Afghanis.
And colonial taxes had to be paid in hemp,
Mhm.
okay? Theoretically, Betsy Ross' first flag was made of hemp.
Yep.
Okay,
Cannabis was part of the United States pharmacopoeia until the 1930s.
That's true.
The AMA opposed the
Little
Marijuana Tax Act because they felt it was good medicine. And then somewhere between the 1930s and the 1970s, we ended up with full prohibition and reefer madness.
And all plant medicine. And reefer medicine, right? That's in the classics. That's the column. That's the hyperactive delusions of grandeur.
right.
Right? That's it's.
And what are we gonna say about the Nixon administration, the madman across the water, you know?
Well, here we go, right? But the government is in the position to like control the mente, the governing of the mind. So if you control the molecules and control how pain is metered out, whether through jail sentences for putting molecules in your mind to mitigate pain, you can change how people think about it.
Yeah, well, and, you know, in the government on a, maybe a little bit more benign, there's the 2018 Farm Bill. And all of a sudden, this thing, we're gonna call it hemp, because we don't want to call it marijuana.
Right,
Okay.
but it's cannabis and both.
Okay, it is 3% or less THC, then we can basically legally control it. You can do amazing things with hemp if you biomagnify it, and if you do things so that you actually end up with 5 milligrams of THC in something that's completely from hemp.
Whoa. Biomagnify.
Yeah.
That's hash.
Or it's
That's just your ego.
hash, or it's taking a full spectrum and subtracting out the CBD to magnify the THC.
Yeah. And there's an entourage, and you can play with the entourage. Remember that artist palette thing I was talking about earlier? If you know the plant profile, you can then play with or sculpt or basically design the profile for this particular person at this particular time.
So the pharmaceutical.
And you can even do it with the individual cannabinoids, or like we do in Chinese medicine, you have an emperor, right? You have the whole entourage, and where does the cannabis fit in that? Classically, when we have ginseng and cannabis being mixed together, leading to enlightenment,
Well, no.
you can rectify the name.
Shenming was closer to like the idea of like a enlightened spirit, but Sorry, you threw me off there,
Ginseng?
ginseng, right, so Tao Hong Jing as well, right, it talks
Yeah.
about the skilled practitioner, now with Taoist connotations with that term will lead to others, but it's to foretell the future. To see things before they happen, Research them 1,000 years later comes back and contradicts and says that Tao exaggerated. But he says that if you do take ginseng and yeah, for real, and if you do take ginseng with cannabis, then you'll, I have the translation, I have to think about it
It's
now.
basically, you'd be very smart, but you can't see the future.
You can't see the future, yeah, yeah.
But you'll have, I'm paraphrasing, but you'll have the resilience to manage whatever it is that comes with the future. when they
Yeah,
walk.
that's what it is.
Why?
People are down.
Your skill level for navigating the unknown.
It seems like it would be really hot. Ginseng and Tibet.
Well, and the recipe has you grind equal parts of ginseng and cannabis flower into a powder. Mix it with water into a paste.
So
and
this is
consume
Nature
the
Gen.
amount that fits on the tip of the knife. Every night before bed. And they say that if you do this, you will develop the ability to foresee, so you have the wisdom basically. is the way I do that.
I got ginseng.
So this
He
is,
just sent me some ginseng, I haven't grounded that.
this
but
is the
I'll go with that.
Apex Materia Medica, okay? 1590s, 1490s, okay? Yeah,
Yes.
Ming, okay?
Wait.
And everything in Chinese medicine leads up to that, and 27 years of study by Li Zhen in multiple volumes. And that does that. It really doesn't, I mean, it gets added to in folk medicine and other countries' medicines. But you start having a winnowing away of Chinese medicine, herbal understanding, especially in
When we're entering the first seasons of the drug wars. The opium wars.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Asia, before we had the wars on people's bloodstreams in North America, right? So,
right.
I mean, cannabis is an interesting history. Makes you think it's interesting, but it's.
Yeah, well, and I'm just gonna throw this one in. Camellia sinensis, okay, the Brits, okay, the ripping off of tea, okay, the movement of tea around in the colonies, okay? It happened with cannabis in a different way, it happened with opium in a different way. The,
Oh,
Well, let's just throw in cacao for the heck
Sure.
of it, you know,
And coffee.
and coffee.
okay, so, I
That's
should get
my
my
favorite
food on
ones.
here, man.
How about the future though, because the ability to work with the plant as a cultivator, move it in different directions morphologically, whether chemically or physically, like there's just so much
A
fun.
farmer, a good farmer.
The idea of like looking for that right, tea version of cannabis versus the right medicinal chemovar version of cannabis, like which one, it's kind of like ice water hash, which one washes the best? It's not necessarily the one that smokes, it's not necessarily trichome profiles, the way it's cured and 2-year-old plants with just the leaves to really get the best pour over
2-year-old. Wow,
aging, yeah,
there's such a thing.
I brought some.
Wow.
Vacuum sealed in a mason jar,
So
humidity
we're
control,
straight with
landrace
the-
strains.
So you can cherry pick a plant, harvest, leave it, let it grow another season, it'll flower again?
You can do that, you definitely can do that, that's not well known, but.
Is that like a
that's
monster
possible.
crop type conversation?
No, monster cropping would be more like stressing the plant in certain ways, so to give it so the extra vigorous growth. What you're talking about is like wintering over. In Southern California, like the annuals, it's like there's some really big trees in some backyards that have been that long. But you kind of have to know how to work with the plant and keep it alive if it does like come
Yeah.
across certain times.
Yeah.
Photo period becomes an interesting thing. So when you harvest and how you.
And then so you'll get a full big old plant tree.
We've seen the Mendo stuff.
Yeah.
That's one season, so you could cut that back, and if you were able to keep it in such a way, it could come back, especially if you bring a plant indoors, it's really easy to.
Okay.
But I was speaking more of just like, holding harvest for longer periods of time, because and we talk about terpenes, right? Terpenes are volatile organic compounds, so modern cannabis might have 4% terpenes, which is really important to your hash makers, but it doesn't stay around very long. So a lot of the flavonoids, and it's the other chemicals within cannabis that kind of maintain over time. Yeah. And Lisa's the real expert about pouring hot water over canvas. I do it, and I can do it, but I just haven't quite evolved enough yet with my own practices with the
Yeah,
plants, I
and
really.
I've been like spending my work at home days with a mix of Taiwanese oolong and cannabis.
I'm more of a burger
So you must give her some. Mom, I understand that, don't you?
Sid, Lisa, you know, I got a kick it as opposed to
Yeah, come on down to San Diego. Wow.
Okay, well, how about this? As lovely as this conversation is, what the fuck do y'all do? I love it, this is great, but what's that?
Oh, we're just on my
Yeah, what do you gotta do?
May I-
This is beautiful.
So we have continuing education classes, the first one that's already out there,
Continuing education for California State Acumen for this.
bingo. And others, we're with Net of Knowledge right now, so Canadians can get it and people in Europe, et cetera.
Okay.
And the first one is 90 minutes, just say no, can OW. Okay? And basically just kind of opening up the topic. What we're working on now is the forgotten roots of cannabis and Chinese medicine and actually making the case for 3 materia medica indications and actions and modern cannabinoid science and where they meet. Okay, because they already meet in our clinic. Okay, we just don't know that. So we're all about no, can OW.
Okay.
All right, so, and literally, I'm just gonna, she did a wonderful research article, got published, okay? The work he's doing, I'm helping out with Tao Hong Jing, okay? Huge resource in the history of Chinese herbology, untranslated, okay? Plus, the practical orientation of a cannabis farmer and cultivator, both endogenously and exogenously, I think I can say safely, okay? To bring that perspective for how it is a spirit medicine, for how it is superior pain relief. You know, we've got Lisa here for how it is superior nutrition. Plus, this beautiful woman and amazing acupuncturist is a breast cancer survivor, okay? Many of our patients are in that neighborhood, right? And the fact that she can use this biochemistry for anti-nausea, let alone mood, let alone whatever.
Yeah, anxiety, peripheral neuropathy as a side effect to chemo. We've got a growing body of literature that is highly suggestive that some of the molecules in this plant, and particularly used as a whole plant, can actually kill some types of cancers. Great evidence, preclinical evidence at this point where cell lines in a petri dish bathed in the appropriate solution are dying, but we don't have clinical trials in actual humans to back that up. And where that research is going is mind blowing.
But we do have Rick Simpson.
We do
Yeah.
have Rick Simpson.
And we do have a study from 1974 that was funded by the federal government that found the same things, injecting tumors with THC and see the tumors shrink. So, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's the homeostatic, when things are out of control, and sometimes they want to have a runaway growth pattern.
Yeah.
You're bringing that in.
I think
Control.
it's not a panacea, but it's a regulator. It can be a regulator when a regulator is needed and then nothing else works.
And it's another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
And it's a tool in the toolbox that in some cases will augment the effects of chemotherapy while mitigating the side effects that will allow a patient that would otherwise need dose reduction to do the full course of treatment that they were being prescribed, while both augmenting the treatment and reducing the harm of the treatment, which is pretty darn cool.
Yeah. And I don't know if I mean it literally, at least figuratively. It is a medicine that should be in the back pocket of every Chinese herb.
Exactly.
Because it has the pedigree, okay, the literature search, the big data search to show that it's been used a long time reliably for certain indications, okay? And with the modern ways we can dose it, the modern ways we can understand it through the endocannabinoid system, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Why not use something that works?
Yeah, I can throw out a couple of case studies. One of my breast cancer patients that was a stage 4 patient with radiation burns and a suppurative tumor who was waiting for 6 weeks to get into wound care. who landed in my office trying to get off of opioids because she wanted to be mentally present for her small child.
Yeah.
And with about 4 weeks of acupuncture and CBD topicals, by the time she got to wound care, she had a tiny little spot that needed debridements and everything else was cleared. And the doctor was like, what the hell have you been doing? Acupuncture.
Yeah.
And cannabis.
Mhm.
And she didn't want to use the cannabis internally because she didn't know how it was going to interact with the chemos that she was on, and her doctor was pretty adamant that they didn't want her doing internal, but they were good with topical.
Okay.
And it worked brilliantly.
Mm, beautiful.
18-year-old with social anxiety, to the point where this young man was calling mom from a closet at parties because couldn't take it with the social interactions. We used a combination of Xiaoyao and low-dose CBD. And within 2 weeks on this protocol, we were talking about dealing with breakthrough anxiety and continuous anxiety.
Wow.
So there's a lot of room for playing with taking this plant, and in my eyes, ideally as a whole plant extract. So you're getting the full entourage and not just single molecules, and combining it with existing Chinese herb formulas. You know, when you start talking about cannabis being one of the primary herbs for menstrual pain, and that's out of estrogen as well. And then you look at one of its primary actions is as a blood mover. So why are we not adding this to the Shui Juyutan or the Tao He Chen Qigong or any, or Guizhi Tulun Yuan, any of the herbal formulas that we're using to move blood stasis in the lower jiao? It's an augmenting herb for those formulas.
One thing I'd love to offer, because that brings so true, and it brings me back to Lisa, your initial concern when you were diagnosed and you were told to talk to a bud tender about which cannabis, and we were talking about the diversity of all the different types of cannabis. So what would we then combine with those formulas if we're talking about cannabinoids? And I think it might be helpful to talk about the role of THC and CBD together, and what the plant does when you put it back out into nature. And we selectively cultivate for fiber, for fuel, for medicine, or even for certain specific cannabinoids. But when it goes back to nature through collective additives, season after season, you see like a bell curve where the two main cannabinoids will be THC and CBD, in almost a 1-to-1 profile, depending on the strength of the overall plant. And then the bell curve is the rest of the minor cannabinoids, usually no more than 1 to 2%. And it's very helpful because a lot of the cannabis that's available has been really selectively bred for just having high THC values. You can cultivate and find seed stock for 1-to-1, 2-to-1 CBD to THC ratios, and those cultivars are being developed all the time. I think it's very helpful, right? At least from a medicinal standpoint, unless you really want to go to the Shenming level quickly with the THC, right? And almost have that psychedelic, the cannabis can have an entheogenic psychedelic component to it. But if you were able to like bring the CBD along with the THC, and even if you're with a bunch of friends and they're consuming a lot of THC, take an edible of CBD beforehand. You can stay in the circle longer.
Yeah, it selectively partially binds to the CB1 receptors, so it buffers the THC as long as you get it in with or before.
Got it. Oh, so afterwards you just
You
write it out.
take it afterwards, you're kind of needing to write it out because you've already got full binding with your receptor.
And that's what people identify with cannabis intoxication, even though it's a very benign LD50 cannabis is through the roof. You really can't overdose on it, right? But the intoxication feeling is typically over medication THC.
And it can be disconcerting to some people will get palpitations on it and feel like they're gonna die.
Oh, yeah.
And so you do get people who end up in the emergency room that have over medicated.
And that's why society has looked at it very, not skeptically, but it's a little bit askance over the history of thousands of years. That person's running around a little crazy. They took too much of that wild plant. I think I'm just gonna use it for fiber and for the seed for food. I don't really want.
Well, they don't
Have that.
And so, I mean, A farmer's always figuring, what can I take to market? Okay, they're not all looking for bud tenders to come in and trim leaves, okay? They're usually looking for how to, make sure they pay the rent, or pay the landlord, so they keep the land, okay? And fiber is a reliable thing, people are gonna need rope.
But.
I'll just go one more on that. If you wanna deal with carbon sequestration, you grow rope and hemp clothes, and then they have a 20-year life cycle, and the carbon's locked up longer than it is in a plant.
So we're gonna talk about the funerary rites, right, the clothing of the rich.
Classic.
The males wearing the male plant, fighting from the male plant, the females wearing.
Wow.
Right, so.
Trip out.
Yeah, the whole grief cycle in Chinese.
Well, I know that in Udon, when we get our custom gear, we have one. Well, I feel like we're gonna talk forever unless I guide it. So,
That is the nature of our
Well, let me,
entourage.
your question, okay?
uh,
So we do continuing education, we
Yeah.
do consulting,
Yeah.
okay? We do a lot of, I'll call myth busting,
okay,
because we talk about if all uses are medicinal, what are you trying to do with it, okay? And then how do you do that with less wear and tear on the system?
Hmm.
Okay, that's good medicine. So really, we think it is a superior medicinal, we can prove it, okay? And we also think we can help people use it in a superior way.
Dope. Where's that mahal?
Dope. Did you just say dope? I think you just said dope.
Pun intended.
Sounds like it's a good thing.
Where's Damaha in 10 years?
Oh,
That's a great.
Tea ceremonies in Hong Kong. I wasn't gonna go Beijing, but you know.
how about Saudi Arabia, right? Oh, no.
I don't know. All right. Well, where can our viewers find you?
Just say no, DMH.com.
Just in the.
And again, that's KNOW, not NO.
Yes.
So if you go to NO, we don't know where you're gonna go. But if you go to KNOW, we know where you're gonna go.
If you can get there.
You know what I know, you know?
And they can also find our courses at this point on medical knowledge.
Okay.
And we've got the one course produced. A lot of what we've talked about here is a prelude to course 2, which we are in the process of putting together and recording.
All right.
And we might have you produce course 3.
Hey. Well, anything involving tea, probably.
Yeah.
Any final words?
I'm gonna just make a shout out for her. We have now, let me see if I can remember the words exactly. Dama Hua Yao Dao Cha. Okay, it is the cannabis flower medicinal tea ceremony. Okay, where you combine either just the bud itself, or the bud and Camellia sinensis, or the bud and some other ginseng, okay, to make a tea using the low temperature method, not the British pouring boiling water on everything. Okay, so you get that nice acid and mellow profile out of it, and then you sip it to get to where you want to go. It's a ceremony after all.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let us take some.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, what do you guys think of the tea? It lasted the entire time. We talked about it.
Man,
That's lovely. And it's just gotten smoother and smoother.
And it's the-
every infusion.
it's what lotus? The white lotus?
It's a lotus brick
Lotus brick.
with big snow mountain.
Big snow mountain. Okay, that's what got the white.
Cool.
Yeah, it's got some earthiness, so it had a lot more earthiness on the urban floors.
Yeah.
Without being overpowering.
Yeah.
And there's a sweetness.
And there's still so much life left. If you recall, just to tie in a little bit of notes on the tea, the initial really, really dark brews, kidney.
Mm.
Right?
Black,
You
dark.
keep brewing, that black turns into a crimson red. You keep brewing, that crimson red turns into a amber gold. So exfoliates. You keep brewing, the same water I pour in is the same water. All the while I'm hydrating, flushing out.
Not to mention, you know, the chemistries that are basically making the kidney work better. You know, making the synapses work.
Mhm. Nice.
It's also got a nice kind of light, almost effervescent feel to it. So there are some of the earthy teas feel like they're really drawn down.
Fine, I'll send you home.
It's just how you pour
Put it into
it.
your syrup. All right, this is a great chat.
So,
Cut 'em.